Hello everybody, I'm Simon Pimenta and today I'm chatting to Faith Canter, who is a coach and author of 3 books. Hello Faith.
Hello. Hi.
How are you doing?
I am very well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm very good, thank you, even though it's very grey outside. Anyway, so I'd like to have a chat with you about raw diet. I watched a video where you talked about this, and I was interested to have a chat with you. I know both of us work with people with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, and raw food diet is something I've experimented with in the past. And when I was doing it, I felt very clear-headed. I sometimes found that I was hungry a lot. So I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on that. And the second reason why I want to talk to you about it is because a lot of people recommend for people with ME/CFS the paleo diet. And if for anyone who doesn't know what that is, very briefly, it's about eating meat, veg, excluding grains, excluding foods with a high GI or glycemic index. That's it in a nutshell. I don't know if you would add anything to that brief summary
No,
of.
that's about right.
But obviously, if you're vegetarian, that's not going to work. So, do you want to just explain to people what raw diet is? It might seem obvious, but I remember talking to someone about it, and they said, "What, you eat raw meat?" I said, "No, no, no." So, tell us, what is a raw food diet?
Well, it's different for everyone, but it's eating food in its most nutritionally dense form. So before it's being processed or cooked to within an inch of its life. So you can still have things heated, but they're not heated to a point where it starts to destroy the nutrients. So it's just heated on a very low heat, which means that you can still have things like pizza and quiche and breads and things like that. They're just they're produced and cooked in a slightly different way.
Right.
So that they're just warmed through rather than actually any of the nutrients cooked off. So it's not just, I think when I found out about raw food myself a few years ago, I was like, how do people just eat salad all day?
Yeah.
That must be really boring and cold, especially in the winter.
Yeah.
But it's not like that. It's actually so much more. Yes, salads and smoothies and juices come into it, and actually probably a lot of people eat more raw these days than they think.
Yeah.
Because they don't realise that, you know, smoothies, juices, that sort of thing do count, as it were, for raw food diet. But it's just eating as nutritionally dense a diet as possible, I guess. That's the best way of putting it. But it is different for everyone because, you know, some people have certain food preferences and some people are vegetarian, some vegan, you know, so it is very different for everyone. So, yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
And so, just breaking it down a bit, give us some ideas of what you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And actually, before we do that, so how would you? I know some people describe themselves as 100% raw. When I experimented with it for quite a while, I was sort of about 70% raw. I would have cooked and raw food for dinner. But what's your personal approach? How would you categorize yourself in that light?
Same. I've fluctuated from one extreme to the other. Sometimes I've been 100, sometimes only a smoothie a day kind of thing.
Right.
I find what works for me is about 80% raw. That means that if I'm out and about, I can still eat some cooked, which is easier. And in the winter, up until recently, I was living in Scotland for quite a few years, and you know, it's the cold, long winters there, having a little bit of warmth is good. But what I would always recommend to people is to listen to yourself. Listen to what feels right for you. When you first start on the raw food route, as it were, you may find, as a lot of people do, that they're running to the toilets a lot.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you're allergic to raw food. It just means your body's adjusting to having, a lot of fruit and veg usually, when a lot of people may not have had that much before.
Yeah.
So I would say if you're wanting to go raw, do it slowly so it's not such a shock to the digestive system. And if you get to 80% and that feels good, and then you go to 90 or 100 and you think, actually, this isn't working for me, then just bring it back. That's fine.
Yeah.
But the more raw food we eat, the more nutrients we're getting in, generally.
Yeah.
It depends what we're eating. The other thing I would always say as well to people is rotate your food. The same as if you're not a raw foodist, rotate your food. We should not be eating the same food every day. One of the reasons many of us end up with so many food intolerances and digestive problems is because we're not eating with the seasons anymore as we would have done.
Yeah.
We may have eaten in particular ways like the paleo or something like that, but we wouldn't have eaten the same food every single day of the year, every single year of the century kind of thing. We would have been eating with the seasons, so our digestive systems would have had times to repair itself from anything, if we'd overeaten stuff, or to then get the nutrients that we require from something else. And if we're eating the same food every day, we have a limited amount of nutrients usually going in, and we use up the essential enzymes in the digestive system much quicker.
Yeah.
So rotate your food. If you're somebody that's eaten the same breakfast for the last 4 years, maybe change it up a little kind of thing. And like I said, that's not just for raw food people, that's people, anyone. Yeah. Anyone doing anything, but especially if you've got digestive problems.
Yeah. So give us a few ideas of what you might have for breakfast.
Okay. Oh yes, that was the original question, wasn't it? I thought there was another question somewhere I'd forgotten about.
It was there.
So it varies. Again, I listen to myself. I listen to, at the moment I'm living in Portugal. The last few weeks been very wet, very cold, and even frost some mornings. And the idea of having a smoothie straight away when I'm freezing doesn't fill me with joy.
Yeah.
So recently I've been having porridge for breakfast, but I have lots of fruit in it.
Sorry, a lot of what you cut out then. What did you say? Lots of
fruit, seeds and nuts with my porridge. I'm using a nut milk, and I'm even having cinnamon, honey, that sort of thing on it.
Yeah.
So it's a really nutrient dense meal still.
Yeah.
And then if I don't have porridge, then I would usually have something like a smoothie, or maybe a really large juice, or just if for some reason I'm really busy in the morning, which I usually get up ridiculously early, so that's not usually a problem, but if there was for some reason something like that, then I might have some fruit on the go, or an avocado or something like that. But people could have, if they're not raw vegan, then there's eggs, that sort of thing as well. So you don't have to, just because you've decided you're going to be raw, eat all raw.
Yeah.
Like I said, really listen to yourself, what your body needs at the time. And, we're in the winter, sometimes we need a little bit of warmth.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So that's, that's kind of breakfast. Then during the day, I'd snack on fruit, nuts, but soaked, because nuts and seeds have enzyme inhibitors in them, which reduces the likelihood you'll absorb as many of the nutrients that they carry as possible. So if you soak them overnight or for a few hours, then you're going to absorb a lot more of the nutrients there. And for people that react to seeds and nuts, they're going to have a lot less of a reaction to them as well.
And what sort of nuts do you go for? What nuts do you eat?
It depends. Again, I really listen to myself. When I was writing my last book, I noticed I was craving walnuts a lot.
Right.
So I was eating a lot of walnuts and also cauliflower. But they say that food that looks like different parts of the body is what you need at the time. And
that's fascinating.
so
Yeah.
I was craving things that look like the brain. So I was like, maybe I need more brain power to
Yeah,
write
yeah,
this
yeah.
book. So I just did that for a few weeks. That's what I ate a lot of. And then I didn't need it after that.
How interesting.
And then other times at the moment, I'm really liking pistachios. But a little while ago, I was eating a lot more cashews.
Right.
Cashews, you'll find if you're going down the raw food route, cashews are used as a base for a lot of foods in raw food.
Right.
So they're used instead of cheese type sauces, they're used instead of creams, they're used in a lot of the soups, they're used in a lot of the cakes, in ice creams, all sorts of things. But for me, what I notice is that they're used a bit too much and you're not rotating your food enough then. So I've kind of tried to not use them as much now, and I'm using things sometimes like macadamians instead. Or just different nuts, like in bases of things, like in the base of a raw cheesecake, I might use things like almonds and walnuts and dates and things like that. So it is trying to rotate your food, but making sure you have lots of different nutrients then as well.
Yeah.
So that's what I would snack on during the day. I make lots of raw food treats for when I have got a sweet tooth and keep them in the freezer because they all freeze really well. All the raw food does.
Right. Have you got some recipes for that on your website?
Yes, there are masses of treat recipes.
Yeah.
So you can make a really delicious chocolate mousse just from some cacao. Or cocoa powder most people have got in their cupboards, avocado and something like some maple syrup or honey or something.
Right.
Whisk it all together, stick it in the freezer for an hour, and you've got a delicious chocolate mousse, which is really, really good for you, and as such, really, really filling as well.
Yeah.
And another one that I make often, which you can eat just as it is or frozen again, is bananas with frozen berries and then some honey or maple syrup again. And then when I take it out the freezer, sometimes I sprinkle cinnamon on, and that makes a delicious kind of berry ice cream, healthy berry ice cream. Because most ice creams are full of rubbish.
Yeah.
You don't have to be doing the raw food diet to eat the raw food. That's the other thing, there are so many, and this is where I started with it, so many beautiful, amazing, really healthy, really nutrient dense desserts, treats, puddings, that sort of thing that are raw. That if you don't want to eat all the rest raw, then you could just do those to start with. They're really easy to do. They keep in the freezer for weeks or if not months on end, and they're great to get out and have, without that kind of guilt of I've eaten half a chocolate cake kind of thing. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I a while back I made some coconut and cocoa balls, which were just amazing. And they were really tasty. I had to stop myself from eating them all in one go, but they were absolutely delicious and much more healthy than some of the sweet treats that I used to have. What about, give me some ideas for, let's say, lunch, if you are sort of doing the raw thing. What sort of things will you make?
Yeah, I tend to have a lighter lunch and a heavier dinner. So my lunch might be something like a salad. But I make all my food with my eyes as well. It has to look nice. And I think when you're making it with love and it looks beautiful and you take your time, you're being really conscious with it, then it's a much nicer process. You're enjoying it more, and also you're actually absorbing more nutrients because you're not in a stressed, busy distracted, conflicted states.
Yeah.
So I tend to have like a salad, and that would have anything from salad leaves, tomatoes, the standard salad stuff, but also then I would put in nuts like walnuts and things. I would maybe put some tahini in there as a bit of a dressing with some olive oil and lime, some fresh ginger or fermented ginger, then avocado. I'm trying to picture in my mind my salad holes, sun-dried tomatoes, anything really, anything that you like, it's just stick it in a salad with a nice dressing. I quite often spiralize things like courgette, carrot, sweet potato, that sort of thing. So there's a thing called a spiralizer, which looks a bit like a torture weapon. And it kind of makes spirals of all these vegetables raw. So they look like spaghetti.
Yeah.
So you can have them in salads, or you can have them instead of pasta in like a spaghetti type thing in your evening meals. And actually, I noticed in the UK, a lot of the supermarkets are now doing pre-spiralized courgette and carrot and things like that as well. So it's obviously kicking off over there, the whole spiralizing thing. So I just make a really, really lovely salad. Usually I might have a soup, which there's loads of raw food soups. So you're only warming them slightly. So you have that warmth, but without cooking off all the nutrients.
Yeah.
Which is obviously nice when the weather's not so nice.
Yeah.
And then you can make raw food scones, biscuits, crackers. Quite often I make crackers out of juice pulp. So the pulp, the pulp you end up throwing away and thinking what a waste from your juicer. You can add herbs and spices to it, flaxseed, maybe a little bit of oil if you're not using flaxseed, and you can put it in a dehydrator or in an oven really, really low, and it dries it out and makes it into crackers.
Wow.
So there's lots and lots of recipes online for various different crackers. You can make dog treats like that and stuff as well. So I like things like that because you're reusing things that you might actually throw away as well, because it can sometimes feel expensive to eat in a healthy way. But actually, if you go online and say, how can I use up this stuff that I'm always left over with? You'll almost always find a raw food recipe to be able to use the stuff up, because most people that are interested in raw food are also interested in food waste as well. So so that kind of thing for lunch, and then in the evenings I might have like raw pizza or raw quiche, again warmed through slightly. What else?
And what's the people can check out a recipe, but what's the base of the quiche and the pizza? How do you make the base?
There's different ways, and there's lots of different recipes, but one of the ones I use a lot is with courgette and flaxseed and a few other ingredients, obviously, but that's the main bulk, and that makes a really good base, and again, healthy base. And because of the flaxseed, the flax helps it stick together, and it's filling as well. So that's a really good base. And what you can do with any of the raw things is, I know sometimes it feels like there's days of preparation before you eat a really nice meal, because you're soaking and you're drying and you're dehydrating, and there's all these different elements to it. But what I've found is, if you make big batches of things that, like I said earlier, they all freeze really well. So you could freeze the dough, as it were, itself, or you can, what I quite often do with the pizza bases is I make like maybe 20 pizza bases all at once and dehydrate them all at the same time and then freeze them. So I'll use a few that day and the day after, but then I'll freeze them without any toppings on. And then whenever I want to use them in the future, I can take them out and put a different topping on, and then use them that way. So there's lots of like little ways of making eating raw easier for yourself. And
it sounds like it makes it easier than, you know, what I do, which is often in the evening cook from scratch every night. So yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so pizzas, quiches, what else might you have in the evening to fill you up?
One of my favourite meals is unfried rice. And that is with wild rice that you soak. And you shouldn't try this with any of the other rices because it's dodgy, not cooking rice.
Yeah.
But wild rice is actually one that you can not cook. As long as it's soaked properly and for long enough. So it's usually for a couple of days and you're changing the water morning and night. And then I make up a kind of a very small kind of chopped salad. So I'll put it through the food processor just really quickly. Things like onion, pepper, maybe some courgette, carrot, peas, beans, maybe that sort of thing, and then I'll put a dressing on it of like ginger, lime, a bit of olive oil, sesame seed oil. It's really good on it, and then some fresh herbs through as well. And then I usually leave it for a couple of hours in the fridge to marinate, and it's so delicious.
It sounds it.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's even better the next day. It's one of those meals it's like better the next day as well, and it's soaked overnight. And that's great at parties and things. I always just stick a big bowl of it in the middle of a party table, and everyone devours it. It's got lots of strong flavours in it. And kids love that usually as well.
No, I'm going to have to try that. That sounds good. It's got some of my favourite ingredients in it. I love the ginger and the sesame oil. Cool. So that's some. And one question I've got is often with people who are eating vegan diets, it said, you know, that they can be deficient in B12. Have you got any thoughts about that or any tips to, you know, just ensure that you are getting a good diet and hitting the bases in terms of vitamins and minerals?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've already said is make sure that you are rotating what you're eating. So you're getting a good mix of different nutrients from different foods. Make sure if you're going raw vegan, maybe, try and make sure that you have fermented foods as much as possible because they're really nutrient dense. Tons of probiotics in them, and also some of them are believed to have things like B12 and stuff in them as well. The other thing that I add to, and I'm glad you asked this actually, the other thing I add to all my fermented foods and most of my raw food is seaweeds. Seaweeds are really, really, really nutrient dense. Some of them have B12 in. They eliminate toxins from the body. If you don't like, you know, I know like if you get a load of seaweed and you stick it in a soup or something, it can be a bit seaweedy. It's a bit much, but you can get shakers and you can just shake it into salad dressings, into cooked food, into soups, ferments, that sort of thing. So you really want to be making sure you have things like that. Lots of greens as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip. I remember a friend who's a nutritionist mentioning seaweed and talking about the detoxing qualities. I might be wrong, but I think after the nuclear issue in Japan, they actually gave people had to eat lots of seaweed because it helps. Because I think it's got lots of iodine in it, hasn't it? Which helps. Yeah,
and they've tested different seaweeds around the world, and even though the ocean in those areas is polluted, the seaweed itself isn't. You know, it doesn't absorb the toxins like in the same way or something. I'm not sure of the science of it. But it's fine to have like seaweed from Japan and things like that. That's still okay. And it's just got so many good nutrients in it, and it's helping you to detox, so it's a win-win. And it's got a lot of unusual nutrients in it that you might struggle to find in your diet in other places. But some veggies and vegans end up having to take B12 supplements. But that doesn't mean that we're not doing, there's an argument that, we should be eating meat then, but actually most meat doesn't have B12 in it now anyway. It's injected as well, so it's coming from the same source as a supplement is from a laboratory. So don't worry too much about that. If you feel that you need to supplement, then everyone else already is anyway.
Sure.
But soil, making sure you don't wash all the soil, all the nutrients, all the goodness off of your foods. It doesn't matter if there's a bit of dirt there, as long as it's organic or something. Because actually we get so many nutrients from the soil, and the bacteria and things that's on that. So not being so obsessed with cleanliness is actually good for us as well.
I've heard that said before. And I just want to ask, obviously, if someone has ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, and they're thinking about doing this, I actually just posted something this morning on a Facebook group because someone was asking about juicing. And one thing I noticed when I had ME and I was juicing, and I found it really beneficial, but what I noticed is that if I juice the vegetables straight from the fridge, I would feel really depleted straight afterwards. And it took me a while to figure out what was going on. And what I started doing, and what I do now, is actually just to add warm water to the mix. So I bring it up to a nice temperature rather than it being cold. And when I started doing that, I just didn't feel that same depletion. And I posted something about that this morning because someone was posting about juicing and not feeling great for it. And I just wondered whether that was an issue. Are there any other cautions that people with ME, chronic fatigue, should think about? Obviously, starting small, not making big changes all in one go is one thing. But anything else, any other tips you'd give someone who with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, who wants to try these things out?
There's a whole host of things, but again, listen to your body. Don't push through if you really feel it's not working for you. Be open to making adjustments like you did. If something is really hot, if you're somebody that drinks your tea or something really hot, or if it's really cold, so it's come out of the freezer or the fridge, that can be a bit of a shock to the system, and the body has to then spend time and energy bringing it to the level that is acceptable in the body for it to do something with. So if it's going in really cold or really hot into the body, you might not want to do that. You might want to kind of more body temperature is what we're aiming for. So things like ice cubes and stuff are not good for that really as well for a lot of people. But also on the other end, I know lots of people that drink scalding hot stuff. So it's doing the same. So really kind of try and be a bit more gentle, so things aren't such a shock to the system like that. As for juicing as well, is they say you should juice your vegetables and eat your fruit.
Right.
Now, the reason for that is quite interesting for people with chronic fatigue syndrome, because with chronic fatigue syndrome and similar ailments like that, we really want to be stabilizing our blood sugars so that we're not doing this whole up, down, chasing the up, with caffeines and other things. So, and it supports the adrenals, which are usually upset as well. So with juicing, if you're juicing a lot of fruit, that's a lot of sugar going straight into your system. So some people feel like really high to start with, and they're like, oh, this is amazing, I feel really great. But then you have the slump the same way as you would if you'd had a coffee or something. And then you're looking for the high again. So you're doing this up and down thing. So it's really good to try, if you are juicing, juice the veg, because there's still going to be sugars there, but a lot less than if it's all the fruit.
Right.
And eat your fruit.
Yeah.
So that you're getting the fibre and the rest of the fruit there as you eat it. So that's something to consider. But the raw food diet as a whole is quite high fruit. Yeah. It's low in other GI high things, like there's no white potato, white flours, rice, that sort of thing. Most people don't bother with caffeine, that sort of thing. So it's low GI in that respect, but it's high with some of the fruits. So if somebody is suffering or thinks they're suffering from something like chronic fatigue syndrome or adrenal problems or anything like that, then just try and have more of the vegetable-based things rather than, so much of the high fruit things, because even the best fruits, if you're eating tons of them, will spike your blood sugars eventually. Right. And like I said, really listen to yourself. If you're running off to the toilet all the time, you're probably not absorbing the nutrients. Yeah. If it doesn't feel right, for you, then just pull back a little bit. Have a little bit more cooked. Yeah. Add in maybe some fermented foods instead of, or add raw food to your cooked food, like have a salad on the side. Yeah. That sort of thing. And like I said earlier as well, it's really important that no matter what diet we're following or whatever we're doing, that we rotate as much as possible. Yeah. And I know when you're not feeling well, you're tired all the time, that you're likely to eat the same kind of easy foods all the time, but try and mix some of them up with some other easy foods. Yeah. Maybe over the weekend I have something else than I have during the week or something. Yeah. Just so that you're getting those nutrients in and you're not depleting the enzymes in the digestive system as well.
Excellent. Okay, so thanks. That's really interesting. If people want to find out more, where do they go, Faith?
My first book has got lots of raw food recipes in it, as well as cooked as well, but every single recipe everywhere, whatever I do, is always free from. Right. So everything is wheat free, processed sugar free, yeast free, gluten free, dairy free. So there's lots of recipes in the first book. There's lots of recipes.
The first book is.
Oh yes, sorry. It's Living a Life Less Toxic.
Right.
There is some recipes in the second book, but less raw food. That's called Cleanse. Right. And there's also lots of recipes, tons and tons of recipes on my blog as well, which you can find on my website, which is www.faithcanter.com, which you can access for free there as well. So there's tons of stuff there.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I'll definitely be going along and checking out the dessert recipes for starters. So yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing all those brilliant ideas with us. And go and check out Faith's website, faithcanter.com. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Thank you very much, Faith.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Bye for now.
Bye.